we have to do a cross match. It should be negative 48 hours before surgery, and we should have a twin theater with interconnection. And what are the differences in the donor anesthesia compared to an ordinary nephrectomy? What is the hydration of the donor? Then
before clipping of renal
what intraoperatively, what are the differences between a normal nephrectomy and donor nephrectomy? Any other extra IV fluids you give compared to the ordinary nephrectomy?
It's a large volume of fluid.
Large volume, adequate hydration. It is not large volume. You should not produce a pulmonary edema in the fellow. Okay, poor mother is giving. So adequate hydration should be maintained in the mother, and you must monitor the urine output right from the start of the surgery, and it should be at least, what should be the urine output maintained?
1 ml per kg.
1 to 2 ml per kg. Normally 0.5 we should be satisfied to have a renal problem, but here we want a little diuretic phase of the kidney, so 1 to 2 ml per hour should be maintained by first initial fluid infusion. Then what other special IV you give intraoperatively?
Mannitol 1 gram.
1 gram. That is
1 gram per kg. 0.7 to 1 gram per kg.
170?
0.7 to 1 gram per kg.
That is for cerebral edema. In neurosurgery, you give that dosage. Okay. In donor nephrectomy, you give only 0.25 grams per kilogram body weight. Okay. So that is the dose at which you give, because you want only. What are the effects? Why you want to give mannitol?
Mannitol will cause. It is an antioxidant, sir. It causes prostaglandin release, sir. So, it causes intravascular volume is increased, sir.
First, what is the property of mannitol? Osmotic diuretic. It is an osmotic diuretic. Okay, so it causes diuresis. Keeps the urine outflow nicely going, and it has got antioxidant property. It reduces the oxidative stress, and it also increases, as you said, the medullary blood flow, which is important, which is the area which can become ischemic very easily by clamping time and all that. So medullary ischemia is prevented, right? What is the pattern of blood flow in the kidney? Which receives the highest blood flow? Which part of the kidney, in a normal kidney, which part of the kidney receives the highest blood flow? Cortex receives maximum blood flow. Then how is the medulla divided? What are all the portions of medulla?
Zona glomerulosa.
Medulla, how are they divided? Outer and inner medulla. Have you not heard of that? Cortex, outer medulla, and inner medulla. And the inner medulla is the most susceptible for ischemic problem. Which drug will cause this medullary ischemia, inner medullary ischemia? Notorious for producing acute kidney damage.
Amino.
Very commonest drug.
NSAID.
NSAID, my God. That is the immediate answer you should give. NSAID is notorious for producing this medullary ischemia, and acute kidney injury can happen. Okay, right. So, mannitol has got all these properties. So you infuse it at the rate of 0.25 grams per kilogram body weight, and then what is warm ischemia? Warm ischemia
time is from clamping of renal vessels, renal artery, to infusion of.
You are right. Go ahead.
Infusion of
preservative fluid.
Preservative fluids.
So preservative fluid, what temperature it is infused into the kidney? Once it is dissected out and taken out of the donor body, how the infusion fluid is pumped into the kidney, isn't it? It's infused through the artery or the vein?
Arteries.
So it is fused into the artery, and all the blood is washed out through the vein. So what temperature it should be, that fluid? Room temperature is okay?
Cold, very
4 degrees centigrade. 4 degrees. So they would have seen this base fluid. What is the base fluid for that? What is the composition of this preservative fluid? What is the base unit?
high potassium and low sodium.
It's the ringer lactate is the base unit, and in which you add 20 ml of PaCl, you add xylocard, you add papaverine, you add some dextrose. All these things are added to maintain the function, because it is going to be completely ischemic now. There is no blood supply. So until you fix it in the recipient and make the blood supply come again, it has to survive. So preservation is done by ice cold infusion of inner lactate with all the other ingredients. Suppose the protocol changes from hospital to hospital, right? So until all the blood is washed out, it is used that, and that is called the warm ischemia time. Until you decrease the temperature of that kidney, we call it as a warm ischemia time. And from once you start the infusion, it is what time it is called?
Cold ischemia.
It is called the cold ischemia time. So until when the cold ischemia will prolong?
Until it is the renal vessels are
Anastomosed and clamp is released into the recipient body. That until the. But in cadaver or deceased donor transplantation,
only cold ischemia.
How long it can last?
24 hours.
You can keep it up to 40 hours. 36 to 40 hours is the time for cold ischemia in deceased donor transplantation. Okay, so harvested kidney will be transported to the center, and until such time you have to maintain the temperature at 4 degrees centigrade to maintain the organ survival. Right? Okay. Right. So donor dissection is over. Kidney has been removed. It has been perfused and cleared of all the blood. Now, what is the anesthetic management challenges you face in the recipient?
Sir, the patient will have.
What are all the important steps you have to tell me? What are all the precautions? What are all the steps that you do for donor anesthesia? What is the type of anesthesia you prefer for recipient?
Balanced general anesthesia with
general anesthesia with endotracheal intubation, controlled ventilation. That is the plan for that. Can you do it under epidural or spinal anesthesia? Because this is only a lower half of the abdomen that we are going to operate.
I will avoid regional anesthesia, sir. Because patient may have platelet dysfunction and coagulation disorders.
So, supposing coagulation, everything is normal. INR, PT, everything is normal. Can you do somebody chat box already answered? So is there any contraindication for doing an epidural or a spinal? Actually, there is no contraindication. Some centers do carry out these surgeries under epidural or spinal anesthesia, but the problem is you will have hypotension, and the transplanted kidney is pressure dependent, or it is under the control of nervous system. Autoregulation, is it there?
Yes, sir.
What is the autoregulation range for kidney? Normal kidney, what is the pressure autoregulation pressure range?
Mean arterial pressure between 60 to
160. Okay. You must answer a little fast in the examination. Examiner cannot be waiting for your answer too long. Okay. So 60 to 160 is the range of autoregulatory pressure, which it will automatically maintain the blood supply. But this will be lost once you dissect and remove the kidney. The nervous control is lost. It takes at least 3 to 4 weeks for it to regain its original nervous control. Okay. Until then, it is a pressure and volume dependent kidney. So you must give. So the choice is only general anesthesia and not regional, because you cannot maintain the pressure sometimes in regional techniques. Okay, that is the answer that you have to give. Right. So if you have planned for GA, what are all the steps?
First,
what are all the pre-op instructions you will give for this patient? We have already said this is an elective procedure.
strict BP should be controlled, sir, and strict glycemic control should
If
be
he is a
done.
diabetic, he is the glycemic control. If he is hypertensive, What are all the drugs preferred for control of hypertension in a patient with CKD if he has got hypertension?
Angiotensin,
Angiotensin,
ARB and
ARB and AACE in CKD?
sir, in early stages they can be.
Early stages it can be there, but in late stages when the damage has occurred, it is better not to use them. So, if at all, if he is on there, what will be your instruction? Will you continue with them or will you
No,
stop?
sir. I will stop, sir, for hypertension. It may cause hypertension, sir.
So, you will have to stop it when?
One day before surgery. One day before surgery.
Okay, right. So, control of blood pressure is important. Control of glycemia is important.
Optimization of
potassium.
Optimization of potassium. So potassium should be less than 5.5 milligram per liter.
Right. So you will check the potassium before sending the patient to theatre. Does he have to have NPO or he can eat something?
He should be in NPO, sir.
So how many hours of NPO? See, these are all the routine things you have to say. 6 hours of NPO, any pre-medication, any drugs which are there, which one to continue, which one to stop. These are all the routine answers that you...
Anti-aspiration prophylaxis should be given, sir.
Why anti-aspiration prophylaxis for this patient?
They are more prone for aspiration, sir. The gastric emptying is
delayed. Gastroparesis is likely in these cases. Right, very good. Then
prophylaxis can be given.
What are the drugs you will give for anti-aspiration prophylaxis? Can cimetidine or ranitidine be given? Books usually say ranitidine 150 milligram oral or 50 milligram IV, then metoclopramide, then 0.3 molar citrate solution. These are all called the trinity of anti-aspiration prophylaxis. In this case of renal failure, can you use cimetidine or ranitidine? If the question is asked, there is a catch in that. You have to say yes or no. Better not to use them because they are renally excreted. So all drugs which are renally excreted should be avoided, right? So you can go for a proton pump inhibitor like pantoprazole or esomeprazole. All these things are available. So they can be given instead of cimetidine H2 receptor blocker. Okay, right. So anti-aspiration prophylaxis you are given. Patient has been starved for 6 hours. Patient has been wheeled into the operating room. Now tell me one by one the steps of anesthesia. Your plan of anesthesia
hemodialysis.
Hemodialysis should have been carried out 24 hours prior to that. And that is the reason why you want to check the potassium just before sending the patient to theatre to make sure that he is not in a hyperkalemic state. Very good. Right. Then?
First patient arriving in the theatre, I will secure a IV line, sir, in the limb opposite to that of the...
very good. Can you tie the BP cuff in that limb?
No, sir.
Heavy lift. So no IV line, no BP cuff on the fistula limb. That is the first and foremost precaution you have to take. Okay? Right, then?
Then cover the fistula with the soft Bonji pad roll, sir.
Okay.
They are more prone for pathological fractures, sir. So
what is the fluid of choice? What fluid you want to start with?
Isotonic.
Isotonic?
Often, sir.
Why not Ringer lactate?
It has potassium, sir.
So avoid all potassium containing solutions. Which IV fluid has got the maximum potassium content?
Plasma light M.
Plasma light M. M, yeah, isolate M. Okay, good. Thread, how much is there? 30 milliequivalents per liter. Okay, so that is the maximum. So all isolate M, G, E, P, everything has got high potassium except Ringer lactate, which has got only how much is the potassium in Ringer lactate?
20.
4 milliequivalents. Right. Right. Then, so you have to avoid all potassium containing solutions. If the heart function is normal, you can go for normal saline. But if the cardiac function is compromised, then go for half normal saline. Right. How much of fluid you can give before the anastomosis is completed and clamp is released? Can you give it just like a regular patient, or you have to restrict this fluid?
30 ml plus previous urine output.
Huh?
Previous hour urine output.
No, my question is how much fluid you will give before clamp release. That is, the kidney is anastomosis completed, and then the arterial and venous clamps are released one by one.
3 liters of fluid.
3 liters for the recipient. Hmm?
Not more than 500 ml, sir. 100 to
So,
200 ml in the pre-op.
100 to 200 ml pre-op itself. You start the fluid in the pre-op.
Not in the pre-op, sir. During the just before transplantation.
Maximum 1 liter will be safe. Okay. So maximum of 1 liter will be the safest fluid limit of normal saline before you release the clamp will be the ideal. Otherwise, sometimes you may overload the patient. Okay. So you have to be very watchful during that time. Right. What are all the induction agents, relaxants, analgesics you can use in the recipient safely?
Propofol can be used with the titrated doses, sir.
Titrated doses?
Of propofol.
Okay. So propofol induction, then intubation. You want to do rapid sequence induction intubation or regular induction?
Rapid sequence.
So rapid sequence induction because of the fear of the possibility of aspiration, right? So for that you use succinylcholine or you want to use a long-acting methylphenidate?
Potassium is less than 5.5 milliequivalent per liter. I'll go with succinylcholine.
Yes.
If it's more than 5.5 milliequivalent.
Yeah. Very good. So you have to decide the choice of succinylcholine based on the potassium value. Okay, right. Supposing potassium is bordering 5.6, slightly more than normal, what will you do? You have to do rapid sequence induction, but you cannot use succinylcholine because there is a borderline elevation of potassium. How to manage that situation?
Rocuronium can be.
Rocuronium.
Rocuronium, sir.
Rocuronium. Rocuronium, is it renally eliminated or is it not renally eliminated?
It is metabolized by plasma.
Is it so? Rocuronium, is it that is the way it is metabolized?
Eliminated by.
Is it renally eliminated or not? That is the question.
Yes, sir.
Then how can you use that drug? It will have a very prolonged action, isn't it? So you can use the same non-depolarizer, safe non-depolarizer which you are planning to be given in a larger doses to achieve the same quick onset of action. So cis-atracurium or atracurium will be the agent of choice, isn't it?
Yes,
why they are the agent of choice for this?
They are eliminated by Hoffman elimination.
Hoffman elimination. Very good. What do you understand by Hoffman elimination?
Non-enzymatic degradation of.
Spontaneous degradation due to changes in the pH as well as temperature. Okay? So that is it's actually a chemistry reaction defined by Hoffman of Germany. He is a chemist, not an anesthesiologist. Okay, it is present in chemistry. So the same drug can be given in larger doses, and you can achieve the same amount of relaxation for intubation. Right. So that is the answer for that patients with moderate elevation of potassium. What is the maintenance? What is the analgesic you want to give?
Fentanyl, sir.
Fentanyl will be ideal choice because it is again only 12% is eliminated by kidney. Otherwise, are all metabolized in the liver itself. So it is not a dangerous drug. Whereas the pethidine and morphine
should be avoided, sir.
Why?
Pethidine is eliminated by most of the kidneys, sir. Pethidine is eliminated by kidneys, sir. And morphine metabolites they may cause post-op.
Both are eliminated by kidney. Both are undergoing what is called glucuronidation, attachment with a glucuronic acid molecule, and made water soluble. And both the metabolites are also equally having a sedative and respiratory depressant effect. That is why we are supposed to avoid them if it's possible. Right. Okay. What about the maintenance? What is the inhalation agent of choice?
Isoflurane, sir.
Isoflurane with oxygen nitrous oxide or
Oxygen,
oxygen gas?
oxygen nitrous I will use, sir. Oxygen
Nitrous
nitrous
you
and
can use.
isoflurane I will use, sir.
Isoflurane you can use. Okay, right. So, what are the interrupted steps during which you have to be very watchful?
Uh,
The recipient.
during plan- uh, during before release, there should be adequate hydration.
Very good. So during clamp release, what are all the complications that can happen? Once the surgeon has completed the anastomosis and he is releasing the artery and venous clamps, at the time, what are all the problems that you can face?
Patient may have
Severe
Acidosis.
hypotension, sudden hypotension, because you are diverting a huge amount of blood to the new kidney. Then
acidosis.
acidosis. What is the preservative solution containing? More
Hyperkalemia, sir.
hyperkalemia. Yes, hyperkalemia and arrhythmias and cardiac arrest also can happen. Okay, these are the two important complications that you have to be very watchful. So you should be by the side of the patient, watching the ECG rhythm and BP. So hypotension, hyperkalemia, and life-threatening ventricular arrhythmia and arrest. All these things are possible because of reperfusion injury at the time of clamp release. So you have to be very, very watchful. How do you know that the kidney is working well? After the clamp
After anastomosis, the kidney will become pink and urine output can be.
So immediate perfusion and immediate secretion of urine. The ureter, content of the ureter will show spurts of urine. Okay, and the kidney will be turgid with pink color. That is the indication of a good perfusion and a good secretion. Supposing the kidney immediately becomes very pink after clamp release, but within 5 minutes it turns into little darker color and more darker shade is coming. What does it indicate?
Hyperacute graft rejection.
Hyperacute graft rejection. Very good. So, if there is a hyperacute rejection, which is one of the complications that can happen. So, if there is a hyperacute change, what will you do? What the surgeon should do? Rather than you, what should the surgeon do? Can he just leave it and allow it with the hope that it can perfuse later?
It should be immediately removed.
He should take a biopsy and then he should remove the kidney. What is called the graft nephrectomy should be done on the table if you suspect hyperacute rejection. Okay. So to establish the diagnosis, the bit of the kidney should be taken as a biopsy and then immediately the graft has to be removed. Otherwise, the patient will go in for what complication? The recipient, what complication they will develop if you leave a hyperacutely rejected kidney in the body?
GVH.
You will go for DIC. That is, the disseminated intravascular coagulation will happen. Okay, right. After that, what is the next step? Once the kidney is functioning well and good urine output is there, what is the next step in the surgery? Where will the urine go?
Bladder.
I think you have not watched any renal transplant procedure at all. Is it right, Habiba? You have not seen one. Okay, I don't blame you. Right. So the ureter has to be attached to the bladder so that it can be drained via the bladder in the natural way. Okay. So ureteric anastomosis, that is called neocysto-ureterostomy. Okay. For that, what will they do? They will inflate the bladder with air and makes it bulge out. Is that step painful? Distension of the bladder, is it a painful procedure or a painless procedure?
Painful procedure.
Yes, it is a painful procedure. So analgesia has to be quite adequate at the time. Okay, right. So post-operatively, once all the anastomosis are successfully done and patient is surgery completed well, how do you reverse the patient? Do you extubate them on the table or you may ventilate them for some time and then extubate?
With the on table, sir.
Most of the time you can extubate them on the table. isn't it? Unless there is a fear of delayed recovery from neuromuscular blockade. So how do you assess the reversibility after using a neuromuscular block drug?
Patient ventilation should be checked for
Objectively, how can you assess the reversibility of a neuromuscular blocking drug?
hand grip and
Objectively, before you give the reversal, what is the monitor that you can use to
neuromuscular monitoring should be done, sir, and POF should be more than 0.7.
that is the answer I am asking. So the neuromuscular blocking should be monitored also in these patients to assess before you give the reversal, right? What is the post-operative fluid regime that you should follow in these cases? Don't tell me nephrologists will take care. I am not worried about that. What should be the guideline for fluid management in the post-operative period?
30 ml plus
30 ml. Why you are always 30 ml is important? Huh?
previous 1 hour urine output.
The previous hour urine output plus 100 ml is the regime that you have to follow. Okay, so that 100 ml is the maintenance, and whatever he has passed out is the requirement. So replacement should be urine output plus 100 ml. Okay, that is the regime that has to be followed. What are the post-op analgesics you have to give?
Patient controlled fentanyl patient controlled analgesia can be given, sir.
Okay.
Then, Tabloc can be given if coagulation fails.
Very good. So these are the following things that you can give. What about the immunosuppression drugs and their reaction to your anesthetic agents? What are all the immunosuppression things that are given?
Cetirizine can antagonize the muscle relaxation.
What pre-medication, I mean, what immunosuppressions are given pre-operatively these patients?
No, pre-operatively immunoglobulins.
Immunoglobulin.
Bacillizumab or cyclosporin, tacrolimus.
Groups of drugs given, isn't it?
Calcineurin
inhibitor, antimetabolites, and steroids. These are the three groups of drugs that are given. So cyclosporin, azathioprine or moxapatil, and then the steroids. These are the three drugs that are commonly given. And what is the risk in giving steroids, especially large doses of steroid? What they can produce? Can they alter the sugar levels?
Sugar levels, yes.
Can they cause infection because they suppress the immunity? So perfect asepsis is very, very important in this surgery. Okay? So you must be very, very careful in asepsis right from starting the IV line, using your laryngoscope. And nowadays you have disposable laryngoscopes marketed by Ramson for COVID patients. So that may be very helpful. You use it in a sterile way and throw it away. Okay, don't reuse the old laryngoscopes. Okay, that is the. We have got another part to be discussed. So I will stop here and relieve you of the tension, and we'll go to the next presentation. Kamachi.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much, sir.
Welcome.
Now we invite Dr. Alex Patel from JRH Mumbai, Western Railway. Over to Dr. Alex Patel. Unmute yourself, Dr. Alex.
Hello, good evening, sir.
Yeah, good evening. Can I see your face, please? Your video is not on.
Yes,
Yeah,
sir.
I can see your face now. Your case scenario, I'll tell you if you don't have a slide for that.
I have, sir.
You have. Put it on then, please.
Sir, I'm sharing it. Is it visible, sir?
No, it is not visible. is showing Dr. Alex is starting to share content. That's all. Content is not seen. Okay, no problem. Don't waste time on that. We'll know everybody, I think, knows the history. You can close your sharing window. And so we have a patient posted for lap cholecystectomy, 44 years old male. On routine preoperative workup, they found out that his BP is 170 by 105 and his urea is 65, creatinine is 2.5, and urine shows 3 plus albumin, 1 plus sugar. And how would you proceed with this case is the case scenario. Right, Alex?
Yes, sir.
Yes. So how do you proceed in this case?
Okay, sir. So basically, so I will start with the evaluation of the patient. Sir, 1 second, my desktop has disappeared. I'm sorry, sir.
No problem. Close it. You can just keep talking because you are audible. Yeah.
Yes, sir. So, sir, so I would proceed with the pre-anesthetic evaluation for this patient. Since the patient is 45 years old and posted for laparoscopic cholecystectomy, and on evaluation, we
Yeah,
have
all that I have told. Don't repeat and waste the time. Now, with these investigatory findings, what is your impression? What is your diagnosis of this condition?
Sir, so based on the investigative findings, my patient is hypertensive. He's having urine sugar positive as well as he's having proteinuria, and his serum creatinine is raised. So
urea is it normal? 65.
Yes, sir. Also, the urea is raised for the patient.
Okay.
So, yes, sir. So this gives me an impression of a patient suffering from a renal dysfunction. Hence, I would like to evaluate the patient as to whether the condition is pre-renal, renal, or post-renal.
Very good, very good.
Yes,
how do you evaluate and how do you find out whether it is pre-renal or post-renal or renal problem itself, intrinsic?
So clinically on history taking, sir, I would like to rule out the causes of pre-renal, renal as well as post-renal by asking about the history of the patient, whether the patient has suffered from all the causes of pre-renal, cardiac causes, or if the patient has suffered through trauma or an acute GI, is he having any GI blood loss? Also, I would like to evaluate the patient for diabetes so that I can know if the causes are renal, because he is also hypertensive, as well as his urinalysis shows blood blood sugars in the urine. So if that is the case, then it could be renal cause, either because of hypertensive nephropathy or diabetic nephropathy, or post-renal if the patient is having any reflux disease, like if he is since he's 45-year-old, BPH is an unlikely cause, but also other causes like renal stone or ureteric stone can cause reflux disease causing hydronephrosis as well as renal dysfunction.
So now in the history itself, I have given that patient as denies any history of headache, facial edema or pedal edema or breathlessness or any other fatigue or this thing. His hemoglobin is 9.8. Now,
Yes, sir.
what is your major concern to differentiate between acute kidney injury and chronic kidney injury? How do you differentiate between the both with these findings? Or do you require any other further testing?
Sir, if I want to distinguish between acute renal and chronic kidney disease, since the patient is not showing any history of any nausea, vomiting, or any uremic symptoms, and also clinically, if there is no
Clinically, no. See, can a patient with a chronic kidney disease have such values by investigation and still be behaving normally without any of this problem, then what is that condition called? When there is a raised elevated creatinine and urea with the low
Azotemia, sir.
hemoglobin, azotemia.
Yes, sir.
Azotemia means, what do you mean by azotemia?
Azotemia is
Any condition where urea is raised is called
Urea is
azotemia.
called
But,
azotemia.
but
Yes, sir.
without any symptoms of nausea, vomiting, if
Vomit.
all these things are there,
Yes,
what is
sir.
that condition called? Can it be a stable or preserved chronic kidney disease patient? There are some categories of patients who have elevated parameters but do not have any clinical symptoms. They are called stable chronic kidney disease patients. This patient is one such patient. Okay. And if you
Okay,
ask him, he may also have normal urine output also. If you find out, so the first question you should ask is, what is your urine output like? Are you passing enough urine per day? And if he says, yes, I am passing 4 or 5 times a day and it may be about 1000 to 1500 ml. How do you
Yes,
account for with the kidney disease prevalent percent kidney disease? How can a patient pass normal quantity of urine? What do you call that?
Sir, then it would be stage 1 chronic kidney disease, wherein the GFR is normal and hence he is able to pass, the urine output is normal.
Okay, very good. That is one possibility. Supposing the GFR is also reduced and urea creatinine is elevated, will you get a urea creatinine elevation if you have the normal 90 ml urine output?
It is possible, sir, if he is having muscle wasting. Since if he is diabetic and diabetic, so there are chances he must be having muscle wasting, because of which urea and creatinine can be increased with a normal GFR.
Okay. Then any test will tell you whether it is the urine output is still maintained, but it is not normal urine.
Urine output is maintained.
Urine output is maintained, volume wise it is okay. But what are the tests will whether to show you whether the urine is of correct quantity, quality or not?
We can check for specific gravity or osmolality of urine.
Very good. That is the point that I told earlier in the discussion. So whenever a patient says he has a normal urine output volume, you must immediately order for a urine specific gravity and osmolality. Okay. So if the patient's urine osmolality remains the same at 1010 or 1020 with a normal plasma osmolality, that means his concentrating ability is gone. So the urine should be able to produce a higher specific gravity of 1050, 1060 if the patient is starved of blood. So you reduce the intake and see the specific gravity. If it is not rising correspondingly, that means he is having no concentrating ability. What he is passing is mere water. Okay. But if a patient is able to avoid normal quantity of urine, what is the advantage for you when he comes for surgery?
Sir, I will be able to better manage the renal perfusion and prevent post-operative renal dysfunction or post-operative AKI by giving adequate fluids.
Yeah, you can give fluids liberally without any fear of overloading the patient. What is the advantage of using this patient for having a normal renal function? Right.
Yes,
now, what other investigation will you do apart from whatever investigations I have given? What other investigation you will do to confirm his kidney function status? Again, the answers are all already given in the earlier discussion itself. If you have listened to that, you will be able to answer that.
Sir, so my basic, I would like to go with a complete blood count to check for the hemoglobin is given, but to check for other parameters like platelet and PT-INR. Also,
one second. Sometimes patients with kidney disease have very low hemoglobin.
Yes, sir.
Isn't it? They may have hemoglobin of 6 or 7 or 8 also, but they don't exhibit any features of anemia like breathlessness, tiredness, lassitude, and all that. How is it possible?
Sir, because of the decrease in the anemia, the oxyhemoglobin curve is shifted to the right. That is why the oxygen delivery to the tissues is enhanced. That could be one of the reasons.
I will put this question in another way for you to easily answer. What are the adaptations that will happen in chronic anemia? See, if a patient loses blood acutely, like in trauma, and the hemoglobin drops from 11 to 6, patient will be suffering from all the features of anemia.
Yes,
But
sir.
if the anemia occurs over a long period of time chronically, what are all the adaptations which make the patient function normally?
Yes, sir. So one of the reason, as I said, the rightward shifting of oxyhemoglobin dissociation.
Is that the first one or something
No,
else?
sir. First would be there would be increase in cardiac output.
Yeah, pulse rate will increase, cardiac output will
Cardiac
They will
output is
always be having a higher pulse rate at rest itself.
Yes,
Then
sir.
cardiac output will increase.
increase.
Then the oxyhemoglobin curve shifts to the right. Shift to
Yes,
the
sir.
right is always right for the tissues. Shift to the left is wrong for the tissues. Okay?
Oh, yes,
So
yes.
remember that way. Right.
Yes, sir.
So how does this shift occur? What is the reason for the shift to the right?
Sir, it is because in CKD there is
No. Generally, what is the reason for the shift to the right? What are all the things that cause the shift of
Shift of-
oxyhemoglobin to right?
right. Sir, acidosis, hypercapnia, increase in 2,3-diphosphoglycerate,
First answer is 2,3
hypoxia,
DPG.
2,3-DPG. Yes, sir.
First answer it should always be 2,3. What is this 2,3 DPG and how do you connect it presence to the shifting?
Sir, so it is 2,3-diphosphoglycerate. Basically, sir, it during anaerobic glycolysis there is increased production of
Glycolysis, does it require oxygen? You say
no, it is
anaerobic.
sorry, sir. During
Glycolysis does not require
anaerobic.
oxygen. It is the
Yes, sir.
first step of breakdown of glucose, and that is the step during which you get this 2,3 DPG. Isn't it?
Yes,
So
sir.
that 2,3 DPG will go and occupy the oxygen binding sites
Oxygen
in the
binding
hemoglobin.
sites.
That
Yes.
once it raises, it will not prevent the oxygen to come back and get reattached. So that is
Yes.
how the tissue delivery increases. Then,
Yes,
of
sir.
course, other conditions automatically, but basically, it is the rise in 2,3 DPG which happens, which is the most important compensatory mechanism for these patients not feeling very tired or going in for anaerobic metabolism. Okay, so this is the answer that
Yes.
you have to give for anemia patients chronically suffering from anemia will have all the adaptations going on. Right. So you
Yes, sir.
continue with your blood investigations. You have done all the
Yes,
CBC, total count, differential count. Then what other
Yes, sir.
investigations you want? To establish the diagnosis of any renal disease, what the important test you want?
Sir, so I already have the RFT, I have the urinalysis.
RFT, you said only urea creatinine, but more
Yes,
than
sir.
that, to establish the diagnosis,
I would also like to have serum electrolytes, sir.
see, your definition of kidney disease is reduction in the GFR to 60 ml
Yes.
per minute per K, isn't it? So
Yes.
GFR estimation or measurement is very, very important. Since
Yes, sir.
again, we
Yes,
have
sir.
discussed that in the earlier. Were you there in the earlier discussion period?
Yes, sir, I was there, sir.
Then how can you forget that? So GFR estimation will only clinch the diagnosis whether the patient is what stage of renal disease is there, whether he is in stage 1 or stage 2 or stage 3. Okay. So
Yes,
without
sir.
GFR, what is the non-invasive method of assessing the renal function?
Sir, so we can do a creatinine clearance test to check for the GFR.
There you have to take blood for creatinine sample and then collect the urine. Any other modern tests which are available to find out the flow, actual flow of urine, blood in the kidney? Isotope studies, have you heard of that?
Yes, sir.
Yeah,
Yes, sir.
isotope studies will tell you whether you can, what is the role of how much blood is flowing, and what about the USG? What is the role of ultrasonogram, which is a non-invasive method of testing? Can ultrasonogram tell you whether the kidney is damaged or not?
Yes, sir. We can sonography can help us identify if there is any hydronephrosis present or not.
Hydronephrosis. Yeah. Supposing there is no hydronephrosis in a normally chronic kidney disease, what will be the reporting by an ultrasonologist? Somebody has typed contracted
Yes.
kidney. even normal size kidney? What can be the changes? What is the exact terminology or wordings that are used by the ultrasonographists? Corticomedullary differentiation is lost. What do you understand by that? What do you understand by that terminology, corticomedullary differentiation loss? Why that happens?
Sir, because of the destruction of the nephrons.
Is it because of the structure of the nephron? Now you are inviting trouble by saying all these things. What are the types of nephrons you have in the kidney? What are the types of nephrons you have in the kidney? Cortical nephrons and juxtamedullary nephrons. What is the difference between why there should be two types of nephron in the kidney?
So juxtamedullary nephrons are basically helps in autoregulation of the kidney.
Autoregulation. Autoregulation of what? Urine formation or blood flow?
Blood flow, autoregulation of the blood flow.
Yeah, is it juxtamedullary function? New physiology I am learning. Cortical is for removal of solutes. Juxtamedullary is for concentration. That is where the long tubules have what is called the countercurrent microorganism and countercurrent multiplication. All these things take place in the medulla. Okay. So the two nephrons have different functions. The cortical mainly elimination of the solutes, and the juxtamedullary nephrons are mainly for concentrating or dilating the urine. Okay. And so if you, depending upon that, you have a increased blood supply to the cortical area. 80% of the blood supply goes to cortical area and 20% goes to the medullary area. So based on the blood supply only, the cortex will look more thick or the darker, and the medulla will look lighter in the ultrasonographic pictures. And that is what is called the corticomedullary differentiation. Okay. So when there is a decreased blood flow because of chronic kidney disease, both the cortex and medulla appear to be of same shadow. It doesn't become darker and lighter. It almost becomes gray in both the areas. That is what is described as corticomedullary differentiation by the ultrasonologist. Okay, so that is how you can find out. So GFR and USG abdomen, and sometimes you can ask for CT scan also to establish the diagnosis of kidney disease in this patient. Can this condition be an acute condition for this patient? Because he says he has no symptoms so far. Can this be an acute condition due to some reason for this patient also posted for somebody has given analgesic induced? Very good. NSAIDs, if he has been so, you must ask for history of any NSAID usage. Right. Now that he has come for polycystectomy, can surgeon could have ordered any investigation which could have caused this renal problem?
Sir, CT scan.
Excellent. Somebody has
Contrast-induced
nephropathy. Fantastic. If he has asked for contrast CT or something like that, and if the patient has not told you, that could have been the cause. What is the time interval between contrast injection and occurrence of kidney damage? 24 to 72 hours. Okay, within 1 to 3 days they will develop and they will have all these parameters. So what is the method of avoiding and what is the method of treating contrast-induced nephropathy? How will you avoid that?
Sir, so to avoid, we can use water-soluble contrast. Then also adequate hydration.
Very good.
Then,
and supposing after hydration, after avoiding all that, it's still you find there is a nephropathy occurring, any drug to treat that? Acetylcysteine can be used. Okay, so acetylcysteine injection can be given to revert the damage that has been caused by that. Okay, so there is a possibility this patient could have had a contrast-induced nephropathy, but the GFR and your USG, all these things will establish the diagnosis of CKD in this patient. Now, with the investigation, further investigation, now we have come to a conclusion that he is in a moderate or third stage of CKD, which is not, because there have been adaptations which make the patient feel normal. What are the normal adaptations that happen in CKD? because majority of the time CKD manifests with clear, obvious evidences very, very late. After 75 to 80% of the nephrons lost their function, then only you get the creatinine elevation happening, isn't it?
Yes,
What
sir.
are all the normal adaptations that take place to make the patient feel normal and fail to recognize that he is having CKD?
So there will be tachycardia.
Adaptation, is it the tachycardia and adaptation? See, what are the three things that will happen if the kidney is not functioning? One is fluid overload, second is hyperkalemia, third is sodium alteration. Okay, all
Yes.
the three things are adapted for nicely by the patient. Okay, so the gastroenterology, gastric elimination and enteral route elimination happens. So these things also rise very, very slowly. That is the condition where you call them as a stable stable chronic kidney disease patient. So now the GFR is about 60 ml per minute, and the
Yes, sir.
moderate elevation of urea and creatinine is there. Will you go ahead with the lap cholecystectomy as planned?
Sir, if
The surgeon is insisting that he is having this problem, so he may go in for the gallbladder cholecystitis because of the stones anytime. So I would like to remove the gallbladder. Somebody is chatting, say no.
first,
Will you
would like
accept?
to,
Patient is now having normal urine output. GFR is 60 ml per hour. So
sir,
he is
so
a stable person. So is it better to
optimize the patient first.
how do you optimize? First question is, will you go ahead and accept for surgery or not?
Sir, since it's an elective procedure, we would like to first like to optimize the this one.
See, optimization comes after you accept him for surgery, isn't it? That means, will you accept him for surgery?
Yes, sir.
Yes. Why do you
Yes, sir.
hesitate? You can accept him for surgery. He is not such a high risk patient because he is having a adequate volume of urine going. He has got only marginally elevated urea creatinine is not 8 or creatinine is not 6 or 8. It is only 2.5, 1 milligram more than the normal higher value. Urea is
Yes, sir.
65. So definitely with other parameters like cardiac function and diabetic control, other things being normal, first answer is you can always accept him for surgery. But what are the precautions you will have to undertake if you are going to accept him for surgery? Kamachi, what is the duration for this session of transmission? Huh?
You can go on for another 10 minutes, sir.
That's all, huh?
No, we are eager to listen to your presentation, sir.
That's
You
why.
got your PowerPoint.
No, that's why if you don't have time, I will close here and finish it fast and then show my presentation. That's why I wanted to.
Yes, sir. Yes,
Right.
sir.
So, what are the precautions you will have to take when you anesthetize this patient for incidental non-cardiac, non-renal surgery?
Yes, sir.
So, what are the important precautions you will have to take?
Sir, so since there will be these patients will have electrolyte imbalances, so I would like to also the potassium levels and sodium levels have to be checked.
Fantastic, very good, right?
Yes, sir. Then this patient are more susceptible to the induction agent causing hypotension because of autonomic neuropathy. So we have to give the induction agents in titrated doses so as to provide prevent intraoperative hypotension and thus further cause renal damage.
Very good.
Then also the patients will be in metabolic acidosis state because of CKD. So we'll have to also keep a check on the ventilator parameters, not so that hypercapnia is not there and it does not aggravate the acidosis state in the patient.
Okay. So the basic rule that you have to follow is prevent an acute renal failure in a stable chronic kidney disease patient. That is the most important dictum that you have to follow. So to prevent an acute renal shutdown in a patient with already existing mild to moderate CKD is to maintain adequate hydration maintain adequate blood pressure so that there is no prolonged hypovolemia or prolonged hypotension intraoperatively. That is rule number 1. Rule number 2,
Yes, sir.
do not use any drugs that are renally eliminated or dependent on the kidney for elimination. So all the precautions you take for a transplant recipient, you have to take here also. So induction agent, maybe propofol will be the best choice. Relaxant, if potassium is normal, so Saxa, if not, cisatracurium or atracurium. Maintenance, oxygen, nitrous oxide, isoflurane. Analgesics, fentanyl. And during reversal also, titrate your neostigmine and don't use too much of neostigmine that can, which is also renally eliminated. Okay. And
Yes, sir.
adequate fluid and catheterize the patient and make sure that there is a urine output of at least 0.5 ml per kg per hour during the entire procedure and as well as the post-operative period. Okay. So this is
Yes,
the
sir.
rule that you have to follow in this case. So I will finish
Yes,
that
sir.
there. And I have prepared a PPT for the benefit of all of you. It is not an